everyone, and welcome to another episode of Coast Connections. When you're alone and life is feeling lonely, can you really go downtown? Petula Clark wrote that 50 years ago, and our downtowns have changed considerably over that time. And we have a really special guest here today. I call him the Downtown Whisperer. Welcome, Michael von Hausen. You are the author of Small is Big, making small to mid-sized downtowns, revitalizing them. So we got a lot to talk about here. This is a very exciting moment for you as well, because we have to mention that this book is the very first book to roll off the VIU press here at Vancouver Island University. So congratulations on that as well. That's
Thank you very much.
Wonderful accomplishment, and also a real milestone for the university as well.
Yes.
Their first book in their publishing program. Fantastic. So Michael, why should we care about downtowns?
Excellent question. Downtowns have evolved over thousands of years, and they're really the place where we meet and greet. In Roman times, that's where the agora, that's where people met. That's where relationships were developed, and that's where transactions happened. We call it business, right? Retail. When in fact, it's all about coming together and trading goods and trading experiences. So it was simply a place, the center, the heart of their community. And interesting enough, when you go to Greek and Roman times, it was all within walking distance of every resident, because they didn't have cars then.
So the big change for downtowns here in North America would have been the car culture.
Yes.
Once the post-war era, 1950s,
Absolutely.
Once the car was introduced, subdivisions started, people started moving outside of the downtown core areas, and we started to lose touch with that central place.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. A term is now coined, it's cocooning. That in fact people spend so much time internally in their homes on the weekend, in their theaters and so forth, that on Monday morning they have to go to the therapist because they're so lonely. I mean, it's ironic. Here we were to escape the downtowns, escape the center that at the time, even the 1800s, you know, they were seen as polluted centers, places to get away from. And the post-World War, 1945, you know, again, affluence kicked in, the car kicked in, everybody could afford one. The way they went to the suburbs, and in a uniculture, in other words, single-family homes generally. So it lost, as Robert Putnam put it, lost the social capital in the communities. Not all, there were, in the early 1900s, there was great neighborhoods. And that's part of the new trend. They call it new urbanism, where we're going back, I call it old suburbanism, where we had great neighborhoods in Vancouver and so forth. There were great tight neighborhoods like Kitsilano, and they were streetcar oriented. And everybody was within 5 minutes of a streetcar stop. So they didn't need a car.
No. And now with transit, that's a whole other issue in terms of access to transit and making a livable downtown space where you can have access to transit and you don't necessarily need a car. It's a pedestrian-friendly, multimodal, all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things, and you know, working with various, as part of my consulting practice, working with smaller downtowns, there is a challenge to get the critical mass of population there. So just like there's a limit to how much square footage of retail, office, and so forth that the population can support, it's somewhat of a chicken and egg, but we as Canadians in Canada have to commit to transit. In other words, we have to invest in our future. Otherwise, it's paying it forward. In other words, I just spent 2 weeks in Germany and Belgium, and boy, their train system, their transit system, it's a commitment. Their bicycle system is far in advance, and you can see it, that people do not have to own a car. Or they're simply have they have one small car in the household.
And I just want to add, before we proceed here, that you are a world-class urban planner and urban designer. You have your own consulting company, and you also teach at SFU and UVic. And you've won many national and provincial awards for some of your design work. So I just want to make sure people know that you have a wealth of experience in this, and you're considered a leading expert. So we're lucky to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit, Michael, about the 4 different types of downtowns. You talk about that in your book, and I'd never really heard that presented before.
Yes.
Let's talk about the bypass downtown.
That's interesting. I've done 16 downtown plans across Western Canada. And part of the origination of this book was at the end of 12 or 13 downtown plans, I sort of said, what have I learned? And I realized that I had to play back those plans and my experiences, even back to 1978 when I was at Harvard studying urban design. I discovered a lot of things over the years that informed this book. And I said, well, I have to research stuff to actually get substance. And one of the first discoveries was I needed to classify downtowns. And I classified simply in, the first was the bypass downtown. You look at many downtowns, including Nanaimo, and you look at the Island Highway. Well, guess what? It bypasses everything. And I asked clients, I'd say, well, why are people not stopping? Well, if you have a highway going past at 100 kilometers an hour, and it's about efficiency, why not go around the downtown? Why go through it? Because we're actually going to slow down and enjoy the experience. In the 50s and 60s, the downtown was that destination. It was the go-to place, and it was sort of the place to be seen in your convertible, or it was called the cruise. So it was a mix of be where the action is, and at the same time be seen.
Well, in fact, people would dress up to go downtown.
Yes.
And there used to be street photographers that would take your picture while you're walking downtown and then sell it to you, you know, in your finery and walking with your children, that type of thing. So yeah, it was an event. And now we bypass it.
The 10-cent movie theater. We've tried to bring back through my work. The Monarch Theater in Medicine Hat has now been reopened. We've created what we call an events street. So on a Friday night, you can light up the sky, and it becomes, again, the place to be. Active, safe, critical mass of people. So it's all about positive activity versus negative activity, and it transforms the downtown from maybe an 8-hour downtown to a 12 to 14-hour downtown. And so remember, when people stay longer, they spend more.
That's right, yeah, exactly. A little bit about the historic downtown.
Yes. And that is, there's been a lot of excellent work by the National Trust in Canada, by the Main Street Program in the United States about restoring the downtowns, the heritage component of it. Worked in Nelson, and there they have, I think, over 100 buildings that in the 80s they restored. But over the last 25 years, the downtown has become tired. Sidewalks, lighting. So the public realm outside those buildings have just become tired. So reactivating that with outdoor patios, with wonderful places to be, places to sit, farmers markets, the transformative street. So the center of the heritage idea was conserve the heritage, but then what about the businesses? What happened, in many cases, the BIAs, Business Improvement Associations, which can tax the landowner, so it funds these improvement, can pay over 20 years. But what happens if you just focus on heritage, you're not focused on business improvement and marketing. And ultimately with business taxation and so forth, which can be twice as much as residential taxation, if the business doesn't improve, they can't pay for that easily.
It's not viable.
So there has to be a return. But as I said, there's been excellent work across Canada, but as I found in my research, it has to be more, it has to have a social component, economic component, a physical component, and that's the heritage component, and then the organizational component. to actually make a complete and comprehensive approach, so that in fact we have social vitality, we have economic resilience, and we have the physical and organizational component that draws people back to their heart.
Yeah, yeah, to the heart, exactly.
Yes.
The tourist downtown.
Yes. Oh, that's what I call the Disney-esque approach. Many people are familiar with Leavenworth, Washington, for instance. And there, it was a dwindling resource town of 1,500. You know, on the island and in British Columbia, we know the resource towns are having a challenge. There, it was literally dying on the vine, but it was not. It was within a 3-hour drive of Seattle. So now, they've transformed it using a Bavarian theme. It is in the mountains, it's wonderfully picturesque, but you wonder sometimes, what about the locals? How do they feel about being overrun by tourists? But to the businesses, thriving, they do, again, a great job, excellent in making an effort of authentic Bavarian design and so forth. But it can be cosmetic. And very important, you go once or twice and you might not go back because it doesn't have more to offer than that.
It sort of overdid itself in that way.
Yes, sometimes it's like anything that's too sweet.
Yeah, there you go.
Right? You sort of go, well, there's a little bit too much. And we get a sense of saying, okay, it's a shopping, you know, it's a shopping experience. They have added adventure, all sorts of, they've they've added muscle to their tourism program, you know, river adventures and so forth. But again, it's about tourism. It's not about balancing business and locals. And so I think it has, that is a special case. But if you focus on that, it's just about, in part, selling trinkets versus developing a business ethic for the new economy, which is the focus of this new book. There's huge opportunity in developing, call it community hives, and also planning for the new demographic. And these smaller towns are more affordable. And we know in the Vancouver region and the Island region, the Victoria region, that affordability is an issue in every community. So the infrastructure in place in smaller towns, in other words, the pipes are in place. Normally the traditional downtown Main Street is in place. So especially millennials are looking for place first and job second. In other words, there's a reversal from our traditional demographic where, oh, resource town, I'm going there for the job, we'll build our family and our future around it. Now with the new economy, it's invisible. So people can come to Nanaimo and say, love Nanaimo, let's build a life around this. So they don't need to be in the place that they work, but they need the support structure.
Yeah, and that is the new wave that,
Yes.
that is coming. And also the part of the new demographic is also the seniors that are looking for more affordable, more connected places, more places that feel like they're part of something bigger rather than living in isolated communities. So that wave is really hitting across the country.
Well, you know, the simple stat is it's going to double over the next 15 to 20 years. And I think it's one of those almost silent things that is not being recognized and not being respected. That as other, like First Nations, they respect their elders as leaders in their community. They are the wisdom. They are the legacy. We have to turn our tables to say, these are our elders. They demand respect and inclusivity in everything we do because they have so much to give back.
Rather than being marginalized or set aside, saying, you know, your worthiness is kind of past its best before date. And
yes,
there's still
At
so
39.
much more. Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah. The fourth type of downtown, Michael, the
Yes.
fabricated downtown.
Yes.
Let's just touch on that.
Yeah, in my practice in 2007, I had the opportunity to tour 4 new shopping centers in the United States. And over 4 days, it was quick. We flew between cities, and these were northern city. So they got snow from Cleveland to Denver, actually from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Cleveland to Denver. So they were out of the mainstream Los Angeles, New York. These were sort of smaller downtowns, but these are shopping centers that were reinventing themselves by adding a main street. So I call it the fabricated downtown because, again, related to the tourism downtown, it's not really real in that it doesn't have a history. But they were doing a great job in my practice because we were trying to create one in Edmonton. We were looking at examples. So from this, like my Disney description in the book, there's lessons we can learn around safety, around just proximity to washrooms. When you gotta go, you gotta go. I'm finding in my practice, one of the top priorities is saying, please, Michael, can you put a washroom in our downtown that's clean, accessible, and so forth? The aspect of thriving businesses that have their door open. When you have your door open in your business, it can increase your sales by 15%.
Really?
Huge. Wow. So all this...
just that invitation.
That invitation. I want you to come into my house. I have something to share with you. So if we get into and that's what I call a relation shop. In other words, you're trying to, building a relationship through a relation shop. In other words, open for business. They wave hello. Why don't you come in? I've got your shirt on. So the traditional Main Street is all about service. It's all about, hi, Michael, I have the shirt for you. It just came in yesterday. You can pop in and try it on, or I've got the suit that'll fit you perfectly. People are looking for that connection in their community versus just consuming. And the other thing is the e-commerce. What's happening is the big box is shrinking. And so the demand for that large presentation area is shrinking. So Main Street can fit into those pop-ups. New business, let's experiment. You can buy online, but come in and try it on.
Yeah.
Exactly. So these, they're not building many shopping centers anymore because people want the connection beyond the consumer landscape. They want a relationship. They want to be where the action is. And that's where business comes in. And that's where in the new economy, creative ideas are spawned into startups.
It's fascinating. I mean, the whole online shopping culture, which sort of exploded, now we're realizing we actually need points of connection in addition to the online, because we're losing our social fabric in so many different aspects.
Yes, you're so right. And there was a study done by, I think it was the Vancouver Foundation in Vancouver a few years ago. And the number one issue, people felt disconnected. They didn't feel connected, especially in Vancouver, you were saying. Wonderful landscape environment. But if the social fabric of a community is breaking down versus Leduc, Alberta, there's happy cities. We've heard that through books and so forth. And Mark at University of Alberta, a colleague I know, he did research on the happiness index. And Leduc, Alberta, south of Edmonton, again, a downtown that now is in its revitalization. In that community, there's a high sense of high happiness index, and he measured it across various boundaries, the sense of connectedness on your block, the sense of community. We need to start measuring that, because if we're not socially connected, that's when the safety, crime, and aspect starts to be an issue in downtowns. And that's where I say we have to take back our downtowns. And it's not pointing at police, it's not pointing at city governments, but it's being part of that neighborhood watch. We have to be responsible Canadian citizens. And that's important in this evolution. So these fabricated downtown, like Disney World in Florida, it's the safest place in North America because there's security watching. And now we don't want to be watched, but in our downtowns, we want that sense of camaraderie that if you drop something, a signal is somebody immediately says, oh, you dropped something. It could be a $10 bill, but there's a consciousness of giving and there's a consciousness of generosity as part of the community.
And looking out for each other.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is all part of community. In your book, Michael, you have some really good ideas on how to jumpstart downtowns.
Yes.
And I love some of the terminology you have, like build sticky places.
Yes.
Tell us what you mean by that.
Yeah, one of the things we say, when people stay longer, they spend more.
They're going to stick around.
Yeah, they stick around. So they don't come, the classic thing is, oh, every downtown has a parking issue. Apparently, it's like crime too, that can be perceived, especially when we're always in an interesting situation. We ought to do a quick inventory early in the morning. Because in order to create sticky places, you have to have accessible, easy, and right-priced parking, if not free, for 3 hours. It's not 2 hours. Actually, City of Langley just instituted 3 hours because 2 wasn't enough to stay longer.
To linger.
Yes.
City of Nanaimo as well.
Exactly.
I think 3.5 hours they changed the parking here downtown. So again,
exactly, because you want them to do multiple activities. Not only go to the dentist, but drop in for coffee, see a best friend, meander a bit, schmooze, as they call it in New York City. But the sticky places are about staying longer, and really taking in the downtown as your heart. It's the place to go, the place to be. And the parking, what we find early in the morning, sometimes part of the issue is the owners of the businesses are parking out front and then say there's a parking problem, when in fact they can park in the back or just a block away where they open up all the free parking along the street for that shorter term parking. You can actually program and manage the parking. So if it's closer right in front of the shop, you might, because of the turnover is half an hour, but you start programming the timing to get the right response behavior. And you might actually, in one downtown we looked at, they charged $1 or $2 for the parking, but that went to a charitable organization.
Love
right?
it.
Or the downtown improvement.
Yeah. You also mentioned park once, create a
Yes.
a area where you're parking once. You're not having to move your car 3 or 4 times
Yes,
to
absolutely.
access all the features that downtown has.
So the Park Once program is, for instance, creating larger parking areas that might be free, have a shuttle to the downtown, or most importantly, have easy access, walking connections that are safe, well lit, and so forth. So if you stay a little longer, you're not worried about what happens to your car. So there's a support program for actually healthy walking in the downtown. Rather than going to, Stairmaster in your home or going to work out, over the day, if you can get that 10,000 steps in your downtown by going, hopefully not to your doctor, but going for coffee or a healthy lunch or whatever, over the day, and doing business meetings, right? And then going home for a couple of hours, and that's your business day. Wouldn't that be refreshing?
Having a walking meeting.
Yes.
Rather than meeting around a table,
Exactly.
go for a walk.
In Nanaimo, especially. Let's meet downtown, park once, and go for a walk along the waterfront.
Yeah, exactly. On our world-class waterfront that we
Exactly.
have here. Plant more trees. Build canopies of trees is also one of the things that you talk about.
Yes. With climate change, I show this. I worked for the City of Vancouver for 10 years and working as their senior landscape architect and senior planner. And I worked on their tree program when trees in the 90s were a real issue. And what we found in downtown South, for instance, we planted a double row of trees. Many people most probably are aware, our viewers are aware, that it used to be, in the 80s, the downtown South was, dingy businesses and nightclubs. Well, it's transformed, and part of that transformation was planting a double row of trees, one on the sidewalk, and then setting back the buildings and setting a second set of trees. So then it became a walking promenade. And from a carbon footprint standpoint, over time, you have the biomass of absorption. So we all experience this on the West Coast through the wonderful cedars we walk through every day, hopefully in your backyard, that we have the healing powers of that, but the fresh air, because they take, in carbon carbon dioxide, and oxygen comes from that. And so it's a fresh, it filters. Trees are living healers in our world. And so in downtowns, this is important, that normally trees in an urban environment live 15 years, 15 minutes, yeah, in certain cases, 15 years versus the 30 to 45. So if we create living environments for them so they can thrive, they will be living 100 years. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yes.
Exactly. Fantastic. Create a Spark program.
Yes. In Medicine Hat, we were working on their downtown plan. And it was interesting, we were saying, and they've done an incredible initiative. They had a corner lot, and they've created a pilot project of office, because they needed more. Municipal Hall needed expansion. So they created an office building, and then also created a plaza, community plaza, and then a residential building. So that was sort of stage one of a pilot program to prove that residential worked in their downtown. Because again, suburban city, why should we live downtown? They wanted to create a wonderful example, and they, what I call, led the change. Added to that, what I say, a Spark program, especially, is starting the momentum, the fire of change and transformation. So I'd say create 5 or 6 projects. And if 3 are successful, it creates momentum in the downtown. Medicine Hat has created a number of initiatives that, through their investments, it's created a 8 to 10 to 1 public investment versus private investment. So for instance, if they invest $100,000 in a grant program, that generates $1 million in private investment.
Wow.
That's exactly what the provincial government and the federal government wants to hear, so they can leverage that money and that investment.
Another example, a good example, is the Campbell River in terms of a Spark program.
Yes.
For just a $50,000 investment in your book, you're talking
Yes.
about that. How they got some movable chairs for the downtown area, started a chalk art festival, and
Yes.
had movies outside. Like small
Exactly.
things that brought people in, not a big expense, but again, sort of started that conversation about how can we really make this a vital, attractive, prosperous, inviting place to be.
Elizabeth, you're so right. I call it small steps to big transformation. And it doesn't even have to cost anything. I think we have to support community members. For instance, we just are in the process of finishing a project in Cowichan Bay Village. And during the presentation of the concept plan to the community, we had a sign-up sheet at the back for what we call the Now program. And since that time, it was in April, 2 weeks later, they had a cleanup of their village.
Yeah.
So now they're on the 2nd and 3rd. We have sort of an 8-step program, and we're designing a longer term implementation program with partners to support that further. So sometimes when people are supported, that's when businesses will bring in sort of in-kind contributions, printing, and they'll support a lunch or something. So again, it comes to connection and partnership.
Yes, exactly.
Many hands make light work.
Very good. And it doesn't take a lot to get these small steps going. I know there are funding issues for bigger things,
Yes.
but private-public partnerships are all part of that. There's grant programs. And you get into some of that in your book as well.
Yes.
But this is a really excellent publication. I also want to comment on the wonderful graphic art in here, Michael, because that's also your handiwork. It's a very easy read, and it's a little Canadian primer as well on a lot of the small towns
Thank
and
you.
small cities. So congratulations. And we've unfortunately run out of time here today, Michael, but it's been really nice. It sounds like the future of downtowns is encouraging. It's one for hope, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Thanks to people who are working like you on this. We appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here. If anybody's interested in further information, contact Vancouver Island University or email me. I'm just Michael von Hausen online. Just Google my name.
Very good. Thank you so much, Michael.
Pleasure.
Thank you for watching, and thank you for connecting with us, and hopefully that you'll go downtown and make some connections there in your own community. We'll see you next time on Coast Connections. Thanks for watching.